The crack wasn't just a loud noise. It felt like the bone of the world breaking right down the middle. My axe stopped in midair. The smoke from my breath clouded my vision, and my heart-an old, sputtering 80-year-old engine gave a painful jolt in my chest, and right after the ice cracked came the scream. It wasn't the howl of a hunting wolf. It was a torn, desperate cry. The sound of sheer terror from an animal being swallowed alive by freezing water. I dropped the axe in the snow. My back gave a wicked twinge the second I turned around. The arthritis in my fingers burned inside my leather gloves like someone had shoved hot needles into my joints. I'm an old man. Too damn old for this wretched cold, too old to live alone in the woods, and definitely too old to play hero. I came out to the middle of nowhere 20 years ago to be forgotten, just waiting for death to take me in my sleep on any given day. But the beast cried out again, weaker now, mixed with the sound of water thrashing in desperation. I grabbed my walking stick and forced my legs to move. The snow was knee-deep, heavy, dragging my boots down. Every step was an ugly fight against my own body. The air tore at my lungs like crushed glass. When I reached the edge of Raven Lake, I wiped the ice from my eyes. What I saw made my blood run cold for good. Right in the middle of the lake, which around this time of year usually has ice thick enough to hold up a pickup truck, was a black crater, a hole of dark, deadly water. And thrashing around inside it, fighting death on pure grit, was a giant beast. Oh, she-bear. But not one of those brown ones that come stealing my blackberries. She was white, white as clean snow. Monster from the far north, lost out here God knows lie. The scene was pitiful and terrifying. Her white fur sinking into the black water, surrounded by ice edges that looked like blades of blue glass. She was slamming her front paws, the size of manhole covers, trying to climb out. But the ice kept breaking, and her claws just slipped on the smooth surface, leaving streaks of blood that froze instantly. And she wasn't just fighting for herself. Propped up on his mother's back, kept mostly out of the water by some miracle, was a soaked cub. He was whimpering a high-pitched, heart-wrenching sound. The mother was burning her very last drop of energy not to save herself, but acting as a flesh and blood buoy to keep her baby from sinking into the lake's darkness. My survival instinct, that cowardly fear that kept me alive, it screamed in my ear, turn your back, Elias. Nature is just like that. The ice collects its toll. Go back to the cabin, lock the door, drink your hot coffee, and let death do its job. What was a crippled old man going to do against half a ton of wild animal on a frozen lake? One wrong step, the ice breaks, the water hits my chest, and my heart stops right then and there. But as I watched the mother sinking, her eyes almost shutting from the freezing cold, I remembered the shallow graves I've dug in my life. I remembered when the fever took my wife and my hands were tied. My kids who left for the big city and forgot about the old man out here. I've lost too much in this life. I've bowed my head to death too many times. Not today. I grumbled to the wind, feeling a hot anger ignite in my chest. Today, the ice goes hungry. I turned around and hauled myself as fast as I could to my tool shed. My stiff hands rummaged through the junk in the dark. I grabbed to coils of thick rope, the kind they use on ships. I grabbed my big felling axe and 2 wide wooden boards. I threw it all onto my old sled, slung the rope over my shoulders, and staggered back to the lake. The weight of the sled almost broke me in half. My spine popped. Cold sweat ran down and froze on my forehead. When I got back to the edge, things looked ugly. The bear was sinking. Only her black, snorting snout and her shoulders were showing. The cub had slipped into the water, and the mother, in total desperation, was pushing him against the edge of the ice with her own face, trying to keep the little guy from going under for good. The cub's crying was weak. The cold was already killing them both. I left the sled on solid ground. I tied the end of the thickest rope to a sturdy dead pine tree right on the bank. I laid flat on my belly on the ice. I knew damn well that if I walked upright, my weight would break the crust. And goodbye, Elias. The cold shot up from the ground, tearing at my gut, piercing right through my leather coat. I pushed the boards ahead of me and crawled over them like a lizard to spread out my body weight. Krrr croc. The ice cracked right underneath me. Death was right down there, just waiting for me to slip up. With every inch forward, I could hear the cracks spreading. Up close, the smell became overwhelming. Fresh blood, rotten sludge from the bottom of the lake. And that wet dog smell, only 1,000 times worse, the stench of a cornered beast. I stopped 10 feet from the hole. The she-bear turned her massive, blood-stained face toward me. We locked eyes in the middle of the howling wind. Her eyes were clouded with pain, but she understood what was happening. She opened that enormous mouth, bared yellow teeth that could crush my skull like a walnut, and let out a weak growl. It was a mother's warning. But the growl ended in a choke on the dirty water. She didn't even have the strength to raise a paw at me. "I know, Your Majesty," I said quietly, my teeth chattering from the cold. "We're both knocking on death's door. But let me help. Let the little one go." I pushed a board until it was teetering on the edge of the water, making a sort of ramp. With stiff fingers, I tied a loose slipknot in the smaller rope. My shoulder screamed in pain when I raised my arm. I tossed the rope into the water. Who knows if it was animal smarts or pure motherly instinct, but the bear gave a brutal upward jerk with her head. That pushed the cub, who landed right on top of the board and slid onto the solid ice. The rope lasso fell perfectly around his belly, hooking right under his front leg. "Gotcha," Primera yelled. I planted my boots on the ice and yanked the rope with one hard pull. My shoulders popped bad. I started crawling backward, dragging the crying animal as he scratched at the ice, pulling him away from the dangerous edge. The cub couldn't have weighed more than 40 pounds, but slipping and thrashing in panic, it felt like I was hauling lead. When he was safe, about 15 feet from the hole, I slacked the rope. The little guy wiggled free and ran shivering toward the dirt bank. When she saw her cub was safe, the mother let out a very long, heavy sigh. And right there, she threw in the towel. The instinct to protect her baby was the only thing keeping her fighting. With her son saved, her massive body simply shut down. She sank right up to eye level. The dark water started turning into an icy slush around her again. The lake was closing the lid. Extreme cold takes away the pain and brings on a lying sleep. She closed her eyes. "No, you're not going to sleep right now," I bellowed, coughing nonstop. "You don't have the right to die after taking such a beating." I crawled like a madman back toward the hole, dragging the thick rope tied to the tree. I got so close that the ice dipped a little and water soaked my glove. I wasn't going to be able to pull a half-done beast out using just arm strength. I needed to use my head. Make Oliver. I stretched my arms out as far as they would go. I plunged my bare hands straight into the freezing water. Son of a bitch, the pain. It felt like hot nails tearing into bone. My heart skipped a beat and my vision went dark. I felt around underwater until I found the bear's broad chest. Her fur felt like a stiff wire brush. She opened one eye slowly but didn't try to bite me. I slipped the end of the thick rope under her massive armpits, making a tight harness across her chest. I crawled backward as fast as I could, slipping, panting, until I was halfway between the hole and the tree. I stood up slowly, staggering, my arms feeling as heavy as lead. I grabbed my big axe. I stood dead center on the taut rope. I wrapped the rope around the axe handle, making a giant tourniquet. I was going to be the winch motor. The cub, over on the bank, seeing his mother disappearing into the water, let out a loud, pained shriek. It was the spark that was missing. The bear's eyes shot wide open again, bloodshot and full of the will to live. She growled, the water bubbling fiercely in her throat. "Heave!" I screamed. I dug the toes of my boots into the ice, gripped the axe, and twisted the tourniquet. Throwing the entire weight of my old body backward all at once, the rope popped, pulled tight as iron rebar. The pine tree held firm on the bank, but the sheer force of the jolt went straight into my back. A wicked spasm tore through my lower spine. I screamed in pain. Thought my chest was going to crack right down the middle. In the water, the rope tightened around the bear's chest. Feeling the pull dragging her upward, the beast caught on to the game plan. With her last breath of life, the big white girl dug her sharp claws into the ice underwater and pushed with her paws. I cranked the lever, twisted the axe, gritting my teeth. She clawed at the ice edge with absolute fury. I took a step back, almost busting my ass. She roared and heaved half of her broad chest out of the water. With the thunder of a bursting dam, that mountain of muscle, water, and sludge slid up onto the solid ice. The surface cracked violently under her weight, dipped a bit, and splashed freezing water in my face. But the momentum threw her forward. The beast's massive frame slammed onto the ground with a thud that shook my feet. She rolled heavily, coming to rest far away from that damned hole. The rope went slack in my hands. The axe dropped. I fell flat on my back on the rough ice, gasping for air, but my lungs wouldn't fill. The air burned my chest like acid. I lay there paralyzed, sprawled out with my arms wide, staring at the grey sky, just waiting for the massive heart attack to take me. But my chest kept rising and falling. My old heart beat strong and hot. I was alive. I turned my head to the side. 30 feet away, the white mountain was down, her chest rising and falling fast, blowing thick clouds of steam over the snow. The cub came, running and whining, crossed the ice back to her and threw himself at her neck. Licking his mother's face like crazy, we had beaten the drowning. But the wind in the woods picked up, bringing the heavy snowflakes of the night. Lying there was just asking to die for nothing. The freezing water in the bear's fur was going to turn into a shell of ice and kill her from hypothermia in under half an hour. I forced myself to get up. Using the axe as a crutch, my legs were shaking like a leaf. I approached her slowly, dragging my feet in the snow. The big girl lifted her head. She didn't growl, didn't try to swipe at me. She just gave me that deep look, the look of someone who knows the hellish ordeal we had just gone through side by side. I turned my back on the most dangerous bear in the world. It was sheer madness, blind trust, the biggest gamble of my entire life. "Come on." Then I mumbled with a mouth twisted by the cold, pointing my chin toward my property. I started walking slowly, dragging myself back to the trees, heading for my place. I didn't look back once. I just kept listening, right behind me, to the heavy sound of claws scraping the ice and the snow crunching under the weight of that furry tractor. She was following me. The beast put her life and her kid's life in the hands of the old man who pulled them both out of the grave. The walk to my big, tightly sealed barn felt like it lasted hours. When I got there, I threw my shoulder against the heavy wooden door. The darkness inside cut off the freezing gale instantly. The smell of dry hay and sawdust was the best smell in the world, the smell of a safe place. I left the double doors open and leaned against the big iron wood stove in the middle of the barn, which was still unlit. The bear balked at the door. A wild animal walking into a closed box that reeks of humans goes against everything their instinct tells them. But the cub, teeth chattering and shivering non-stop, didn't care. He ran right in and threw himself onto a pile of dry straw in the corner. The mother let out a loud snort through her nose and lumbered heavily in after him. The floorboards actually groaned under her weight. I closed the doors and slid the thick iron deadbolt. Not to lock the beast inside, but to keep death and the blizzard locked out. With hands purple and stiff from the cold, I pulled my glove off with my teeth. I struck a match. My hand was shaking so badly that I blew the damn thing out. I broke 3 more sticks out of pure nerves. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath to force the trembling to stop, and struck the 4th match hard. The flame caught. I tossed the flame into the stove onto some kindling soaked in old kerosene. The fire flared up. I shoved some good oak logs in there. In 10 minutes, the iron stove was roaring. The metal got so hot it threw a glorious wave of heat through the barn, pushing the bitter chill right back to the walls. I pulled up an empty apple crate, sat near the fire, and stayed there, barely a dozen feet away from the deadliest beast in the forest. It was a hair-raising scene, but it was damn beautiful. The bear lay down in the hay and wrapped her giant body around the cub to warm him up. The little guy found his mom's belly and started nursing loudly. The intense heat from the stove hit the big girl's soaked fur, and the barn filled with a white mist. Steam rose off her back like smoke from a hot kettle. She was literally thawing out. Life and warmth were returning to the body of that beautiful monster. The smell in there got incredibly strong. A stinging stench of wet dog, blood, foul sludge, and that heavy, wild bear scent. A stink that would give any suited city slicker a panic attack. But to me, filling my lungs with that stuffy air, it was the perfume of victory over the ice. I pulled a dented metal flask out of my coat pocket, opened it up, and took a long swig of that cheap, burning whiskey. It went down, tearing at my throat, but it lit a damn good fire in my belly. I let out my breath slowly, resting my white head in my hands. The palms of my hands were raw from hauling that rope, bleeding slightly and muddying my knuckles. The bear lifted her head from the straw. Her black eye gleamed with the reflection of the fire. The silence we shared wasn't the tension of waiting to be attacked. It was that sacred peace of those who clashed head-on with death and lived to tell the tale. She blinked at me, real slow, a silent, animal way of saying we were square. Then she rested her heavy chin on her paws and closed her eyes to sleep the sleep of the righteous. I spent 20 years locked up in these woods, thinking my life was just sitting on a stump waiting for my last day to arrive. I figured living alone would turn my heart hard as stone and that the cold would just blanket me on any given day. I felt useless, an old ghost waiting for the grave. I looked at the white giant sleeping peacefully over in the corner, her huge chest rising and falling. I listened to the fire crackling hard in the logs and the little sounds of the cub nursing, safe from the cruel world outside. The heat started tingling in my fingertips and my big toe. I felt the blood pounding harder in my veins, pumping life right over my wrecked back and my arthritis. My body was a pit of pain. My lower back was killing me. But you know what? It was a damn good pain. The pain of a living man. I wasn't a ghost anymore. I was feeling the heat, feeling the booze go down, feeling the ache, breathing deep. I was more alive than I had been in the last 20 years of my entire life. Winter will come knocking on my door someday. That's more certain than the daylight. Old age doesn't forgive anyone out here. and I can already hear Lady Death howling right alongside the gale outside, pushing against the wooden door and scratching at the barn walls out of pure spite. But I looked at the big, white monster resting under my roof. I raised my flask to her in a silent toast. Just the two of us chilling out on that freezing night, and I gave a real, tired smile lit up by the glow of the stove. The cold, my age, and the snow might take me away next winter. But tonight, they're taking nobody. Tonight life put its foot down and beat death barehanded, on pure guts and the sheer stubbornness of a broken-down old man. Tonight, we locked the deadbolt, lit the fire, and left death outside in the cold, wanting what it couldn't have, and coming up empty-handed on the ice.